Good afternoon. First, thank you very much for having me here today. Appreciate the invitation to come here and talk a little bit about Berlitz, what we do, how we do it. Berlitz is basically the premier language training institute in the world. We're broken into three major divisions, the first being language training. We also have an interpretation division and a publication and translation division. Berlitz has been around since 1878. We were founded over 100 years ago in Providence, Rhode Island. And this 100 years has given us the experience to know what to do and how to do it. Literally, Berlitz is using a proven method, a time-proven method. We have a worldwide network of resources with over 300 language centers in 30 countries around the world. These 30 language centers give us the resources to constantly update and modernize all that which we need to do regarding language training, interpreting skills, and translations and publications. Berlitz gives definitely the most up-to-date techniques and materials available in the world today regarding these three divisions. In fact, most Fortune 500 companies use Berlitz. Also, typical consumers use Berlitz, as well as people coming into the United States. Sometimes the fallacy is that Berlitz only teaches foreign languages, but in fact, English is the language we're teaching the most of to those individuals coming into the US in order to learn English, vacation, whatever. Berlitz uses a secret method basically in its success. That method is time traveled, time trained, and it regards the same way we learn to speak our first language. First listening, then repeating, and then speaking. We use no translation, no grammar rules, and it's a lot of fun. If you have fun doing it, that's the way you're going to have, that's where you're actually going to learn the language and the way you're going to profit from a Berlitz experience. Berlitz actually uses a conversational approach. With a conversational approach, you learn to speak the way you learned your native language. First by listening, speaking, and then repeating. In this way, you acquire practical skills, not skills such as those that you learned perhaps in your high school class, wherein you sat, memorized, regurgitated the same old verb forms over and over again, but rather you have a situation where you're actually learning things that are going to apply to your day-to-day situation. The Berlitz method is actually very fast, in the sense that from the moment you enter Berlitz, you're actually using the language that you were there to learn, nothing else. No English, no translation, hence you're going to have an immediate impact in the language learning. Also, the method is actually very effective. With translation having been eliminated, you go right to the source language and you get right to the point, satisfy your need, and you can move on and start doing what you need to do. Also, the complete difference between the Berlitz training method and actual high school, university, other language training methods is the factor of the fun. You can't do something, you cannot learn if you're not having a good time, not enjoying yourself. With Berlitz, with no dull grammar rules, no tedious translation, you have no memorization to bore you either. This gives you an enjoyable experience, something a little different than you might have had when you first went to high school and tried that first Spanish class. Also, Berlitz uses a teamwork approach. Typically, people feel that when they're learning a language, they've always had one instructor, and they need to learn only from one person. This is actually going to be a deterrent to language learning because, in fact, you'll end up mimicking one person, understanding only that person when you go to the foreign country that you're visiting, and you'll only be able to speak to that person. With Berlitz, we actually use a teamwork approach in that we're supplying a number of instructors, giving you different voices, accents, and speech patterns. In this way, you'll be able to understand numbers of people rather than just your high school teacher, basically, when you go to Spain. Actually, in many cases, Berlitz has instructors that are from all the countries that they're representing. In other words, we do not use the typical American certified teacher in the public school system to teach you a foreign language, but rather you end up learning a foreign language from a native speaker. In this way, you're mimicking someone who's speaking the language correctly, you're listening, and you're repeating the language correctly. When you speak with proper pronunciation, hear and repeat, you'll be understood. Also, the instructors are actually using natural correct grammar. You're here speaking and repeating with correct grammar. In this way, you won't be misunderstood. Again, Berlitz is teaching a real language, the way the language is spoken today, not really a Shakespearean version, but a language that is constantly changing and a language that we're bringing to you in an updated and modern fashion. At Berlitz, you're learning to communicate in today's language. All our instructors are well educated. They have college level equivalencies in their countries, and they bring to Berlitz backgrounds from anywhere from engineering, business, education. In this way, we can supply all the needs possible for today's modern, updated versions that we need to approach. For example, some people don't like to just come in and learn language for the sake of a trip. They might need engineering skills when they go down to their country. We have many computer-related fields coming in now. Wide, expansive areas of China have now opened up and are supplying technical skills in those areas in computer engineering. If you have somebody that only knows how to teach a language and has no other background, that's all you're going to learn about. Rather, Berlitz is at least supplying some technical vocabulary that we incorporate into the learning situation. We're making the programs flexible enough so that whether you are just going on a trip to Paris or going over to negotiate a deal, you have the vocabulary that's going to apply to that given situation. Also, all instructors go through pre-employment training. They go through current updated employee training throughout their tenure with Berlitz, constantly giving them better skills, updated skills, bringing them back to more situations where they can have better vocabulary to work with the students that they're involved with. As Berlitz is constantly updating and the world needs are constantly updating, so are our instructors. In fact, most of the instructors have backgrounds that will relate to many situations as well as basic needs. All the programs that we have at Berlitz are going to be not just be classroom situations using oral situations, but rather we also provide reinforcement materials should somebody have a need to reacquire the skills and most importantly, to review and refresh the skills throughout their tenure as a student with Berlitz. We have audiovisual materials, multimedia materials consisting of cassettes and text that can actually save 25% review time as a student at Berlitz. The more homework you do, ultimately, the better you're going to get, and these are the materials that are going to provide you with those skills. Also, the multimedia materials are constantly updated to provide better comprehension. You learn to listen to someone without the benefit of actually seeing them. The whole basis of this method is to acquire language skills without the visual crutch. In other words, if you have a situation where you need to see the written word, as we're constantly trained throughout our upbringing, you'll always need to see the written word, and you'll end up having to travel to Paris with your dictionary constantly in hand. In this way, these materials are actually letting you listen, repeat constantly on your own should you have a commute, should you have 45 minutes of free time a night, and in that way, you learn to listen to someone without the benefit of a visual need. Also, if anybody's ever tried speaking on the telephone in a foreign language, this can sometimes be the most difficult thing because you lose the benefit of the person in front of you. 50 to 65% of communication is visual communication, whether it's gesticulations, voice intonation. If you have somebody in front of you and you don't speak a foreign language, it's much easier to understand what's happening than if you've ever tried to pick up a phone and make a long-distance call. That can sometimes be the most frustrating thing, and it's a thing we ultimately all have to do because whether you're making a hotel reservation or negotiating business, you're going to end up having to pick up the phone at some point. The use of the materials provides the ability to not have a person in front of you, not have that visual need. Also, when the program ends and your life as a student at Berlitz, hopefully it never ends, but if it should, you do have these cassettes to ultimately maintain, review, and reinforce your language learning. Basically, Berlitz teaches in three primary fashions. First, we have individual instruction, in which a student has one-on-one intensive instruction. Basically, this instruction works on the premise that if there's nobody else in the learning situation, you're getting 50% speaking time and 50% listening comprehension time. This gives you a 100% learning situation, and it's probably the fastest way that Berlitz can actually teach in a given 45-minute to 7.5-hour period which are the lengths of the classes, basically. Typically, if you do something on a one-on-one basis, you'll ultimately be able to reinforce, review, move at your own pace, and control the flexibility of your program by scheduling these situations anytime you would need to. Other situations that we have are also semi-private situations where you're actually sharing the learning situation with a secondary person. A little bit slower, but it gives you the factor of having a secondary individual to practice with. We do actually a lot of role plays in our learning situation. We review and implement situations that might be pertinent to you, be they sales training situations, engineering techniques, the presentation you need to make to your next customer. And if you have a secondary person in the learning situation, you can start to use them and they can use you to benefit and work with you to develop those language skills. The semi-private situation, you set it up on a flexible schedule, but obviously on the same schedule as the secondary person. Other types of instruction are small group instruction, wherein we're actually training a number of people, nothing like the small groups that you might have had at the local community colleges or in your classroom in high school, but rather 3 to 5 people, 3 to 6 people, so that the situation remains personal. Language training does not work in a situation with a large number of people because you need to speak. You need to have the time to review, exercise, and if you don't exercise your oral skills and comprehension skills in a classroom, you can't learn. Therefore, Berlitz is never going to increase classroom size by more than 6 to 8 people. We know that there are certain things that have to be considered when learning a language, and one of them is speaking time. It probably ends up being the most important factor because if you don't speak, you don't learn, and you never really get over the fear of speaking a foreign language because fear is ultimately the most detrimental thing when you're attempting to speak in a foreign tongue. A little bit about the actual Berlitz translation and interpretation divisions and publication divisions. Berlitz prides itself on having a one-stop situation. An individual can come to us, they can learn a language prior to their trip, they can learn interpreting skills for going into the courtroom situations. They can literally take any type of situation they need to and develop it as far as they need to from a beginner level all the way to an advanced level. In other words, you can come in, we can translate your documents. The Berlitz Translation Division, based in New York and Los Angeles, has the capability of doing everything from the simple personal document all the way to the computer graphics, desktop publishing, typesetting, even in Chinese, which is a capability which is not available much today. Believe it or not, Chinese is still done the old-fashioned way with the Gutenberg press style desktop typesetting process. But nonetheless, we can do everything from audio-visual translation, dubbing. Berlitz has done many of the actual movies you might have seen. We go into the home in the sense of video with actual translation situations, subtitling, etc. So as well as the translation, you have the small documents. We do everything. If anybody ever needs to go down and have their birth certificate translated, we handle jobs as well of that tenor. Interpreting also becomes a major facet of our language training, in the sense we're very capable of supplying all types of interpreters for all types of situations, be they court-related, meeting situations, be it interpreters necessary at the United Nations for both consecutive and simultaneous training situations. Berlitz has those capabilities. We can set them up on short notice and provide fully qualified interpreters for everything from the liaison situation at the airport to the hearing, deposition, courtroom style situation. As far as all situations related to language training, one of the perhaps the most important ultimately is how one acts when one gets to the country that they're going to. A lot of people feel that if they learn the language, they'll actually have a capability of going to the country, fitting right in instantly, feeling right at home, in which case that is not always true. You can learn a language, you can speak that language fluently, But until you have a situation wherein you're comfortable in your surroundings and you learn to appreciate a little bit more about the people in the country around you, you can't really adjust. You can't get done what you'd like to do. You don't have as much fun. I don't know if any of you have ever had the situation where you've gone to Paris and felt like you've been snubbed by the Parisian population, but a lot of it comes down to not just language skills, but rather what we call cross-cultural skills. Berlitz also has a capability to provide this cross-cultural training. What tends to happen with families relocating abroad and people just taking trips is that they end up working and functioning, doing everything they need